Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It may be the last session, but it's not the least. It's the most vibrant session, so I really request that you re-energize yourself. Could do an icebreaker session with you as well to get you to do a few things. But I'm going to actually just give you a break on, provided you don't sleep during our session. So my session speaks to broadly on the issues of forensic evidence in gender-based violence. And considering the impact of gender-based violence that may lead to femicide, we cannot delay in responding and making sure that every person has access to justice. And within the court system, there's a heavy reliance on physical evidence. And hence, this particular topic is of prominence as to how science, law, and technology meet. And so I'm going to start my presentation looking at the impact databases. And to make it more graphic and interesting, I'm going to actually mention a case, a landmark case within the South African context. You may be very familiar with it, but I hope you bear with me. It really depicts the importance of databases, whether it's finger, DNA, ballistics, genetic genealogy. Databases have such significance. And in the SADC region, we only have 4 countries that have databases. So the case study starts off like this. Mickey, a 34-year-old male, was charged with several offenses committed between 2011 and 2015. The accused conducted a reign of terror over a 4-year period. During evenings and early mornings, he would target victims, females, grab and threaten them, knife point, demand their money and cellular phones. He would then proceed to an isolated place and rape them, beating them into compliance by punching them or stabbing them to prevent resistance or their calls for help. Some victims were raped more than once. 9 of his 30 victims were children under the age of 16, with the youngest victim being 11 years. Breakthrough in the investigation occurred when Mickey was arrested and convicted for an unrelated charge of assault in 2014, for which he subsequently served 11 months imprisonment. While serving his sentence in custody, and in terms of the legislation pertaining to DNA, law enforcement were mandated to collect DNA samples from all convicted offenders retrospectively and run the resultant DNA profile through the National Forensic DNA Database for a comparative search against all other indices, including crime scene index, which in this case contained the forensic DNA profiles of an unknown male in 30 separate rape cases. There was a match. Mickey was linked to the 30 unsolved rapes due to the DNA sample obtained as a result of an unrelated conviction for common assault. Due to the overwhelming DNA evidence against the accused, Mickey pleaded guilty to 84 charges, which included 30 counts of rape, 27 of kidnapping, 12 of robbery with aggravating circumstances, and 4 of assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Mickey was ultimately sentenced to 15 life sentences and an additional 120 years to run concurrently. Without the power of the DNA legislation, which allowed DNA samples to be collected from the accused while he was serving time as a convicted offender, it is unquestionable that Mickey would have continued his reign of terror. By linking Mickey to his crimes through the National Forensic Database, potential vulnerable victims were saved. So when we look at the challenges around forensic evidence in the SADC region, and these particular elements were a result of discussions emanating from the DNA conference that we held earlier this year in May, we found that there was a lack of coordination and collaboration between stakeholders. Training. Everyone needs to be involved in training. Procedures, documentation, and resources were not in place. Legal frameworks were not in place. And the importance of maintaining a proper chain of custody was not present. And this is really important in preventing contamination of evidence. Databases are very controversial. Legislation is very important, and also observing the ethical issues around databases. Experts were not adequately trained and did not present well at court, and there are contradictions in their documentation and report writing. So, in addressing any particular model of collaboration, we need to consider these particular principles, characteristics, and elements. And this particular comes from our global essential services package that was jointly drafted by UN entities, several UN entities. So it's really important to be able to make sure that these basics are considered as foundational issues. Now, I'm just going to very quickly take you through the recent 2024 UNOD SADC Handbook on Forensic Evidence on gender-based violence. And importantly, it's not only for forensic pathologists or service providers, it's for everyone. Everyone would really benefit from a read of this document. It looks at several chapters, and one looking at the context of GBV, really the holistic context. And looking at also the second chapter being on paternity disputes and maintenance claims. Now, that's really the general paternity claims. These deal with context of conflict and humanitarian crises. And we had the Assistant Secretary General contribute to this particular chapter. We found that troop-giving countries went into particular conflict zones and impregnated vulnerable people, leaving a lot of paternity claims being unresolved. Then we looked at introduction to forensic science and its value in gender-based violence cases, looking at the response and management and preservation of evidence, maintaining the chapter of chain of custody of evidence, which is really important for all of you, quality assurance processes and forensic science, and dealing with mixed profiles, which is more scientific in GBV. So we really spoke at great length about the databases, and in putting together this particular handbook, we really consulted with a global group of experts. So you're really getting the best in this handbook. But importantly, that when doing training, conducting several workshops throughout the SADC regions, we also found that this particular book has to be reviewed and updated as well. But it's a great start. We looked at in Chapter 9, looking at the evidentiary value of DNA, interpretation and evaluation of forensic evidence, but looking also how can we really equip experts in how they can present at court and also in their documentation, and looking at the forensic evidence in the courtroom. And this is really important for prosecutors, judicial officers, in how judicial officers also adjudicate in these matters, really understanding and interpreting forensic issues. Guidance on the communication of forensic evidence in media. We find that media commonly creates havoc with cases. They mispresent in the media, so it is important to be able to look at how we make them more knowledgeable around this issue. But forensic science capacity development was very important as well. I'm rushing because I think I have no time left, but really important to say that victim's body is a crime scene. And that's really critical to look at how we can provide that linkage between a victim and offender. And we need to interrogate, and interrogate because we need to put all the pieces together. And when we have credibility of evidence, we need to be able to look at, do we have the credible equipment, personnel, are they well trained? Process, standard operating procedures is important, making sure that they're specialists and they provide the consistent documentation. Also, there needs to be internal and external examination because most often we find that examinations are external, but there could be some kind of chip, wood, or knife. It has been found lodged in a person's body, and this is never picked up. If a victim says, I've been bitten, look at where that bite mark occurred. So it's very important. And most victims are either shot, beaten, or stabbed. Also, we find that toxicology reports are very important. We find in most situations, we find victims are also intoxicated. So we need to be able to look at not only biological evidence, but non-biological evidence as well. And there's a whole range of issues pertaining to that. So I'm going to skip through lots of these, but it's really a good read to be able to go back into this book. The chain of custody and forensic evidence is critical because sometimes there's a belief that if the evidence is presented at court, it can be infallible. But it's important that the evidence is never contaminated from the time it's collected at the scene and how it is preserved, stored, and presented ultimately at court. And that's critical. So, concluding thoughts, no one, and just no one can be at a scene without leaving some trace of their presence. Evidence collected at the crime scene can be collaborated. However, we need to ensure meticulous procedures for the chain of custody and how it's presented at court. Importantly, we all need to invest in a standard operating procedures that includes every service provider. Importantly, again, read the handbook and give me your comments. Thank you.
Another round of applause for that insightful presentation. Our next speaker is Brigadier General Professor Lawson F. Simapuka, a highly esteemed public health and infectious disease physician with an extensive career spanning over 30 years. And currently, Brigadier General Professor is the Executive Director of the National Forensic Authority in Zambia. Let's welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. May I take cognizance of the DPP, His Lordship, the directors, prosecution coming from the region, and indeed the chief, Chemuka. My approach will be taking it from a policy and legal framework point of view. So you may wish to know that in the past, the provision of forensic services was basically fragmented and indeed rudimentary. Each institution had its own approach. And even the services, they were quite narrow in scope and often resulting in poor resolution of most of the criminal cases that came before the courts of law. Identification of perpetrators of sexual crimes was largely based on witnesses and victim testimonies without collaborative DNA evidence. And this further complicated the resolution of the sex offenses. To mitigate the challenges that I've just alluded to, government enacted the National Forensic Act number 2 of 2020, which established three institutions. The National Forensic Authority, where I'm coming from, the Office of the State Forensic Pathologist. Okay, sorry about that. And the National Forensic Science and Biometrics Department. Then the act was operationalized on the 5th of May under Secretary Instrument number 36 of 2021. So the mandate of the National Forensic Authority is to regulate the practice of forensic science and forensic pathology in Zambia. Basically, regulation entails that all institutions offering forensic services adhere to the minimum scientific standards in the criminal justice system. The Act empowers the authority to develop and enforce guidelines, standards, regulations related to forensic services. That is just a caption of some of the functions of the National Forensic Authority. I'll just mention a few. There's the issue of licensing of all forensic service providers, be it in public or indeed in the private sector. I already alluded to the fact of the development and coming up of forensic standards and guidelines, and indeed handling of complaints and investigating the complaints of a forensic nature. Then also hold public awareness or indeed campaigns on forensic matters, and ensuring that forensic facilities use validated techniques and equipment. Also, we're not leaving out personnel. We need the right personnel to practice or indeed do forensic work. And we are also facilitating research in the area of forensics. The slide that I'm just projecting now looks at the clients, or indeed the stakeholders, in terms of regulation. We have one of the largest stakeholders, the police, the Drug Enforcement Committee, the Commission, the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Department of National Parks and Wildlife, Anti-Terror, RATSA, and two departments that are part of the discussion forum. I did allude to the fact that there was establishment of the Office of State Forensic Pathologist, and indeed the Office of Biometrics and Forensic Science. So what are we doing in terms of policy formulation? You are aware that, you may be aware that in 2023, the DNA laboratory was commissioned and is now operational. We are creating a DNA database. The creation is underway. We've been collecting buccal samples for DNA so that we can build or populate the database. Then we're also coming up with one of the databases that was alluded to by the previous speaker, the forensic DNA database and the legal framework surrounding the DNA forensic database. We've gone into MOUs with the University of Cape Town and the National Forensic Science University in India for training and collaboration in research. Enhancing the regulatory framework, there are some key activities that are aimed at achieving that. One of them is the review of the National Forensic Act. There were a few lacunas that were identified, and we've been given provisional approval by Cabinet to amend the National Forensic Act. Then there's a promulgation of the National Forensic Regulations, and we've developed a number of standards and guidelines. In as far as DNA analysis is concerned and the regulation, we are coming up with clauses to take care of the establishment of or management of the forensic databases. And also, we are looking at a broader aspect where we're now going to include clinical forensic medicine. As in the past, we're only concentrating on forensic pathology. And also, we're looking at regulation of forensic practitioners. There is progress on the National Forensic General Regulation, and this is what will lead to the National Forensic Authority to start regulating both private and public forensic institutions, and indeed go ahead and start the licensing of these institutions. Among those standards and guidelines that have been developed are the guidelines on the crime scene recovery of evidential material for forensic DNA analysis. They've come up with performance standards for forensic pathology practice in Zambia, under for publication in the Zambian Gazette are the standards and guidelines for the inspection of forensic science facilities, the standards and guidelines for the inspection of forensic pathology facilities, and also guidelines for forensic research. That's establishment of forensic research ethics committee. Further underway, we have guidelines that are coming up for forensic management of survivors of sexual assault. And we have guidelines coming up for the general management of a crime scene. You may wish to know that sometimes when we get into a crime scene, you find that the community has contaminated it, and indeed, the law enforcers, they go in and contaminate it. And in that way, it's very difficult when it comes to analysis, which involves DNA evidence. And also, we are coming up with verifications guidelines, as I alluded to earlier on. Prospects, different databases, automated fingerprint identification database, the National Integrated Ballistics Information Database, and the Criminal Justice Information Database. So in the new act, or the act to be, for the coming amendments, this will be provided for in the law. Thank you.
Thank you for that insightful presentation. Our next speaker is Mr. Innocent Makasa, a forensic analyst at the Ministry of Home Affairs and Internal Security, National Forensic and Science Biometrics Department, with over 20 years of experience in criminal investigations. A round of applause, please.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I think most of you know me as your witness. Witness, can you tell the court? I'm glad today the DPP, I'm here as a speaker and not as a witness. The number of things we need to, I think, discuss between the National Forensic Science and Biometrics Department and your office, the DPP, as it relates to not just DNA evidence in court, but also general forensic evidence presentation and also estimation of evidential value of the evidence. I'll not, due to limited time, there's no conclusion and there's no introduction of my presentation because I know the DPP will give me another time to speak to you, my colleagues. Today I can call my colleagues on various issues related to forensic science. Indeed, in Zambia currently, under the Ministry of Home Affairs and Internal Security, now we have the DNA forensic lab, which is that the equipment you are seeing there is the lab which is fund running, and we are analyzing DNA samples from all law enforcement agencies, including the police. So majority of the cases that you handle, I'm sure some of you have cases where DNA evidence is involved. That's how we sort out and keep the evidentiary material when it's presented to us by the law enforcement. We make sure that we don't mix the materials. I'll just quickly talk about the workflow of things. Because sometimes we receive calls. So the matter is coming up and we need evidence or the DNA report. So the workflow is basically related to the analysis of forensic DNA. So it starts with an incident. It may be rape, defilement, homicide, wildlife, or robbery or volume crimes. We deal with all those cases in terms of identification of perpetrators using DNA. Of course, the primary identification should be the fingerprints that are deposited or left at the crime scene. But now we have escalated to the use of DNA, given the sensitivity of the equipment that we're using. So even where someone touched, we're able to generate a profile which can identify the person who touched articles at the crime scene. That's why we are worried about the containment of human DNA and contamination of crime scene during the initial stages when the police or first responders get to the crime scene. After that, when it comes to the crime management, which I've just spoken about, where there is identification of the material that need to be collected and submitted to the lab for analysis. There's collection, packaging, and transportation. That's why the issue of maintenance of the chain of custody of evidence is very important, so that there's no room for contamination or change of the status or integrity of the sample that has been collected. Then once it's properly collected, it's brought to the lab where we do body fluid identification using DNA analysis. And then after DNA analysis is done, we generate a report after reviewing the facts in a case. I'll speak to that later if time allows. And then a report is generated where we even give a probative value of the generated report. So when we talk about the probative value, we're talking about the probative value of the DNA evidence in a case, given the circumstances as viewed by the prosecutors and also against the circumstances as viewed by the defense. Because we have no chance to speak to you at the time we're doing the analysis, we just do assumptions on what the prosecutors think based on the report that we get from the police. And also, we also think on behalf of the defense, because we know the time we're doing this, we will have not shared the results, so the defense can also have a proposition on the matter. So the evaluation actually looks, I think, so looks about the body fluid identification. So just to identify the body fluid, is it semen? May corroborate the circumstances and or the accusations or before the dockets or before the police or before you. So if it's semen, and the allegations are related to sexual assault, then you know there's that proportion. That's we endeavor to identify the body fluid before we do the DNA. Because remember, DNA is found in all the cells. It's the same DNA from spermatozoa cells, from the skin cells, from the hair, from the saliva, from the blood. It's the same DNA. So it's important before we do the DNA, we identify the fluid, body fluid, so that it enhances your case. Again, the other thing you need to take note is the types of DNA that we use. We may use what we call the autosomal ester. So when you get the docket, in fact, we insist, the DPPs are that our colleagues call us when they have a DNA report in the docket before the trial so that we familiarize them to the facts and the type of DNA we use. Because when we use the first one, the autosomal STR, this one, it's for everyone. We get this from our parents, and it's the same in female and it's the same in male. When we use, sometimes, for example, in gang rapes, or when we don't have sufficient DNA to exclude the male DNA from the autosomal one from the victim, for example, if it's a rape from the vaginal swab, then we do what we call the chromosome, the YSTR, which in targets the Y chromosome. And now remember, this Y chromosome has less evidential value because my Y chromosome, my brothers have it the same way. My cousins to my father's brother, they have the same one. So it reduces the value. That's why when we have that, we need to discuss that in relation to the facts before. Because if the case is that the person were moving with a cousin from the father's side, a male cousin, and then they rape, then we will not know. They will have the same YSTR. But mitochondria will get it from the mother. So we need also to discuss these things upfront before we go to trial. So you understand them. So the other things we need to ask is, was the DNA profile generated? Yes, it was generated. Was it a profile? We have full and partial. Because of time. Then we recently, last week, I wish to report that we have now launched the PODIS database. Now we have the database. Previously, all the cases that had no suspects, we never analyzed them. Now we have started analyzing them and uploading the results into the database. Very soon we shall be having matches of one crime scene to another crime scene, of crimes that are perpetrated by the same individual, especially sexual-related crimes. So the next thing we shall wait is now to populate the reference databases, but that's dependent on the enactment of the law, so that it allows the police or law enforcement to collect reference samples from any person who has an interaction with them. Once that's done, then we start populating, and we will start now resolving more cases going forward. In our report, you see we put numbers. The relatedness, 99.9%. It's not random. We do calculations. Also, we put, say, 1 in a million, for example. That's how we report. That report comes from when we do the probability of an evidence given the prosecution's hypothesis and the probability of an evidence given the defense hypothesis. These are the things I said we just make assumptions based on the report. However, most of the time when I'm at court, when I give that, the prosecution they do ask another question, which we call prosecutor's fallacy. You know, when we say, I think I can even end on this because this is very important for us. When we say the strength of this evidence, given the facts before the given the prosecutor's hypothesis where you are saying the perpetrator is the one who left the stain at the crime scene. That's the prosecutors. Then we put that against the defense where they say it is someone else other than the suspect, but from the population might have left the stain. So we do that. However, in some cases when we say the probability of this evidence is 99% that the prosecutions are right. The prosecution changed things and say that the prosecutions are right because of this DNA evidence. So it's like the other way I can say it, if I can say that if I get prosecutor, the 99% 99.9 of the times, the prosecutor will have a bachelor's degree. That's the statistics. But you turn it to say, if I get a person who has a low degree or a bachelor's degree, 99.9% is a prosecutor. It doesn't work like you can see that it's the same things, but I've trained them and they don't give the same statistics. So that fallacy, I always we trouble with it in court, but I think we can avoid that if we have these engagements. And I thank you for having considered that. That's how quickly, my time is up. That's how the results look like. So that is, colleagues, is a mixed profile of more than two individuals. That's what we are struggling with. We don't know. Is this the DNA, the mixture in this DNA? Did it come from the police who were processing the crime scene? Is it the contamination from members of the public who might have gone? Is it the doctor, for example, who's collecting this sample? So those things we need to seal them up as we process the crime scene in the first instances. Yeah, basically that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation. We call upon our last speaker, and certainly not the least. He's very well known to everyone in this room. We call to the podium Dr. Mchele Ng'anga.
Thank you for having me. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols are observed. Thank you for having me, people. And I'm honored to stand in the presence of my Lord, Frederick Mchenga. That's an inspiration for a very, very long time. I've always known as PW7 or 8 or 9. That's how you refer to me. My real names are Dr. Uchenga Mchele, and I'm a pharmacologist. And today I'm going to talk to you about the impact of DNA analysis in our work that we do in medical investigations. This is an introduction to where I'm coming from. I work at the Office of the State Forensic Pathologist. This is an autonomous death investigation institution responsible for medical death investigations or autopsies. And our scope of work includes conducting postmortems, forensic identification, crime scene investigations. Over the last 3 years, we've conducted over 8,000 autopsies countrywide. And to speak with that and add to relevance of what we're talking about today, DNA analysis has very cases where traditional identification is ineffective. And by traditional, I mean things like fingerprints and presumptive identification by relatives. I'll get to that. And I must say as well that it also improves accuracy in documenting cause of death and is involved around these deaths. And it enhances life outcomes in cases that are violent or suspicious. Now, as a key trend, there is increasing reliance by our office and other forensic pathologists to literally identify individuals that die in disasters, mass fatalities, being victims and scrutinized men. I know that most of you have had cases where we've exhumed bodies or we found skeletons. One of the key issues around that is how do you identify these individuals? So I'm going to be very practical. So I'm going to talk about cases. I know this was in the media, so it's nothing unethical. For those of you that deal in ethics like myself, it's nothing unethical. There's a Zambian student in Russia who died, and his skeleton or his remains were exhumed and brought to Zambia. And there are no physical identifiers on this body. And yet it was claimed that this was a Zambian who had died in the diaspora. And so, through the faces that way, that the National Forensic Science and Biometrics Department handled was this case. It is one case because it was the first identification case done in Zambia. And find that indeed this was a Zambian movement of the names as described as suspect. It was the most past that. Case two is of victims who died in a road traffic accident in Serenje. Again, we have a lot of these kind of cases where people drown, a group of people drown, like Bangalore, a bunch of people was a road traffic accident and everyone is incinerated, to use that word. We only have pieces of very living tissue, issues. DNA, the DNA analysis has enabled us to identify these individuals. When identifying these individuals, it brings closure. And I can imagine for you as prosecutors, it's not very nice to prosecute someone who's not known. Because to prosecute cases where there's no identity. Because I know for a fact that the Inquest Act always insists on us knowing who has died. Question of who has died, most of the times when we have mass disasters or scrutinized remains, has to be answered using DNA analysis. And that's very important. And these are shows again, I'm discussing this because it's in public domain. We have to make sure that we are on course. One of the most tiring and eventful activities that we conduct as an office is exhumations. There we have exhumations and we rely on relatives identifying a dose. So you can imagine it. The society needs this now for us to understand, and that's DNA analysis. It would be a requirement that we identify these individuals that we're exhuming through DNA analysis. So again, DNA analysis for us is a game changer, and it's good that it will impact on our identification of these individuals who are probably murdered and fired, and then we come and exhume them. They need identification, right? You know, you've heard of a case in Japan where someone was going missing and then is resurrected. It's those kind of things that show the impact of DNA analysis on medical death investigations. Now, some of the challenges that we are facing is one, the need for increased capacity building and infrastructure. So we know that there is DNA analysis that is being provided, but we need to have spaces or infrastructure that allows us to obtain DNA from these individuals or from these skeletal remains. Now, the only suitable place is Lusaka, right? And we need to have medical legal death investigation centers all around the country so that we can better serve the community, especially in obtaining DNA evidence. I think we are some of the biggest clients to the National Forensic Science and Biometrics Department. We're always providing bonds to them so that they can identify who our deceased. In conclusion, DNA analysis has revolutionized medical legal investigations, and there are key cases in Zambia. I have avoided to discuss most of the criminal cases that we handle based just on the fact that it's not very ethical to discuss investigative information. So I've tried as much as possible to deal with cases only that in public domain and have already been educated upon. So some of the recommendations that we need to increase funding for forensic labs and DNA testing. We need to train more forensic experts. We need to expand the use of DNA exhumations and raster victim identification. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc, for that insightful presentation. Due to time constraints, we are only allowing one question. Yes, kindly indicate your name, your institution, as well as whom the question is directed to.
My name, good afternoon.
There's someone else who.
My name is Noah Mwanza. I'm from Zambia Revenue Authority. My question is directed to the National Forensics Authority. My question is tailored on digital forensics. I know that most of the panelists have covered on the part of other forensics, but I'm asking on the digital forensics because currently, when you look at your act, it does not include the digital forensics. Another aspect is to do with your act deals with the qualification. It proposed that the minimum qualification for those experts should be a master's. And that requirement has created a lot of problems in court because most of our digital forensics experts, they have got only the first degree. And when you look at our universities in Zambia, they don't provide that masters. Not only that, when you also look at the handwriting experts, they are trained from the police laboratories and they don't also have masters. So my question is, how quickly are you amending the act to accommodate these people who are trained from laboratories? Because as it stands now, they cannot present their evidence before the court as experts. And mind you, we are dealing with financial crimes, and our source of evidence are coming from these digital forensic tools. I thank you.
You may proceed to attend to the question.
Thank you very much for those two questions. Maybe I'll start with digital forensics. In the current act, the National Forensic Act number 2 of 2020, digital forensics is covered under forensic science. So there was no breakdown of each of these components of forensic science, which includes physics, ballistics, biology, digital forensics, biometrics. So that's one of the reasons, because you, the stakeholders, were always complaining that it's not coming out in the act. The recommendations that are coming through from you, the stakeholders, is that at least when you come to forensic science services, there should be a mention of the kind of services that are covered under it. So it will be taken care of. As I alluded to when I was making my presentation, we've had provisional approval from the cabinet to amend the act, and ZRA has been represented adequately. If you speak to the director at ZRA in charge of criminal investigation, I think she will be able to give you more information on that. Qualifications, yes, it has been a source of concern. We understand in the definitions of where it comes to forensic analysts, it talked about an expert with a postgraduate qualification in forensic science. So that will be taken care of, because all the stakeholders actually were in the direction that we should not include qualifications in the act. So in terms of qualifications, we'll be looking at experience. It's part of qualifications. There could be academic qualifications, and indeed CPDs tend over time. So we are cognizant of the fact that there have been delays in the courts of law because of this, but be rest assured that this is being taken care of adequately, since the majority of the stakeholders feel this is not a direction that we should not go. We should, this is a direction that we are going is actually affecting the criminal justice system. So tomorrow, I think you'll be represented adequately. We're having a stakeholders meeting at the Ministry of Home Affairs. We were supposed to have the meeting last week, but it was postponed to this week. So do not worry. Everything is being taken care of. But your duty is when we are having stakeholders meetings, you should come. Because if you don't voice, it will be very difficult to capture what you could consider as lacunas in the law. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. Judge had some comments to make. You go ahead, Judge.
Thank you. I'll be brief and to the point. I'm commenting on two provisions of the Criminal Procedure Code, Section 192 and Section 191A. Section 192, I'm directing my comment to DPP and the experts there. If you look at Section 192, it's dealing with what it calls an examination of a chemical and bacteriological examination. What this provision says is that if the results of this examination are in the form of an affidavit, the person who conducted the examination need not come to court to give evidence. The affidavit can be received into evidence. Now, we notice that this provision is rarely employed. Even when you are having an examination of a poison, the public analyst does a report, and because the public analyst has done a report, the public analyst must personally come to give evidence. On many occasions, they are unable to come to give that evidence. My question is, why are we still insisting on doing reports when we know very well that there are problems with transport? And I believe the Office of the Public Analyst is only in Lusaka. So when you have any of these poison testing, you need to get that person to go and testify. And yet the law allows the use of an affidavit. That is my comment for you, TPP. The next one is on Section 191A, Dr. Mcherenganga's area. It's not aimed at him. The comment is for state advocates. I think we've abused this provision. So what this provision allows is for a postmortem report or a medical report by a medical doctor to be admitted even if the doctor has not been called. But even where the medical report is clear, during the prosecution, cross-examination may start indicating that you need to call the doctor. What has happened on many occasions, because the medical report is clear, we find it not necessary to call the doctor. And I'll tell you that when you are dealing with cases of suicide, for example, there are instances where, because of the position of the body, it's clear the person could not have committed suicide. So there are those borderline cases where it becomes necessary for you to call the doctor to come and give evidence, even if the report is clear, because in cross-examination, there is a suggestion, for example, that the spleen burst because of malaria. The police officer cannot answer that question, but the doctor will be able to answer the question. So my advice to you prosecutors is that follow the case as the cross-examination is unfolding. And even with a clear medical report, you may require to call the doctor because it's only the doctor who can come and explain. These two examples, we've had cases. We had a case of murder that failed because of poisoning. The test was carried out. There was a report that said there was an organophosphate. But because the public analyst was not brought and the police officer tendered it, it was inadmissible. The procedure was not followed. So those are the two comments I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge, for those comments. We will read to those. We've now come to the end of our session. Thank you so much for your attention, and one last round of applause for our esteemed speakers. Thank you.
We are now coming to the close of this wonderful conference. All beautiful things must come to an end, unfortunately. If I had my way, would all just be coming here every day and learning. Before we call upon two people who help us with closing remarks, a reminder, if you haven't filled your feedback form, please do. At the end, you'll find that dollars being offered. There are dollars being offered at the end. So please fill the survey up to the end. Please feel it's really important. I'm joking about it, but it's really important for making us do better next year. So give us the feedback so that we can implement what it is you give us the feedback on. Also, the bios for the speakers are on the QR code. The law journal is on sale outside. Please support the NPA by buying a copy. Then for the NPA officers, if you have not signed the registers, please ensure that you sign the register before you leave. Angelica. So in the NPA, the last year we've experienced successes, we've laughed, we have held parties, we've held awards. It's been a wonderful time. But in the midst of this wonderful time, we've also lost our beloved ones. We've lost some officers, and in remembrance of these people who we were with, who we served the nation together, we just want to stand up and observe a moment of silence. And before we observe the moment of silence, there's a small clip that has been put together to remember our departed, beloved officers. So those are our departed officers who we valiantly fought the fight together with, and they're no longer with us. And may their souls rest in peace. We just ask that we observe 1 minute of silence before we go to the next. Indeed, we may take our seats. May their souls rest in peace. Before we call upon His Lordship to give the official closing remarks, we'll call upon our guest, Advocate Malwa, to give us some remarks before we call upon His Lordship to close. Advocate Malwa.
Thank you very much, Directors of Ceremony, for the opportunity which you have given to me. It seems the days are too short. It could be better if we could stay here in Lusaka for 5 days and then we enjoy more. It is with a profound honor and especially profound for me to be requested to make remarks at the end of the conference of the prosecuting authority of the Republic of Zambia. We are happy to be here as prosecutors. We have shared our knowledge. We have shared our expertise. And I think there is a lot which definitely will take away with to our respective places. First and foremost, and on behalf of the Namibian prosecution, I really want to express my gratitude to our host, Advocate Gilbert Piri, Senior Counsel, the Director of Prosecutions. You have shown to me, and I think to the entire heads of prosecution in the SADC region, that we have a dedicated colleague, a brother, who have just joined the ranks of the heads of the prosecution within the SADC region. We appreciated very much your hospitality, your organization of events, and insightful leadership. You have demonstrated to us that you are a career prosecutor. I know you were practicing law in private, but I think there it was a mistake. You are a defender of the voiceless people in society. The discussions which we have will surely shape the future of our prosecutorial efforts for years to come, especially in this corner of Africa, the SADC region. Let me also thank the colleagues who came from far away, from Europe, from the rest of Africa, who came and shared their knowledge and expertise with us. We have learned a lot, especially in most areas of law, which we practice as prosecutors. Let us go home and take stock from what we have learned from here. We have heard from the Deputy Judge President of the Court of Appeal when he has shared openly with us even the mistakes we do in carrying out our mandate. From here, I hope that each and every prosecutor, whether it's present or not present, will take seriously what the honorable judge have said. It always good to get a conviction, but when it is set aside on appeal, your victim will be very angry with you, will not be happy, and you will not have anything to explain to him or her. Let me also thank the organizing committee, the technical team, and the support staff from the Office of the Prosecution in Zambia, who tireless efforts in ensuring the success of the conference. And actually, all these days we have been here, they are just smiling. I can tell you, as a person who has been in Zambia previously, I thought it was the old generation. But it seems that is the culture of the Zambian people. They are friendly, they are happy, every time smiling. Those of us who came from other parts of Africa, let's learn something. Let's be happy every time. Our brothers and sisters has demonstrated that to us. I also want to thank the people who have been cooking for us. We really enjoyed the food. Especially some of you might not have tasted. I'm talking about those who came outside Zambia. Have you tasted kapenda? You don't know what you missed. I have tasted everything which I saw here, so that I cook my kapenda back home. Thank you very much for our caterers. You have kept our tummies filled and our energies higher. Without your dedication behind the scenes, nothing could have happened or be made possible. Also for our drivers, I don't want to leave the people who have been carrying us for these 3 days. It's because of their expertise being on the steering wheel. We are able every day and night to come and go back to our hotels. I thank them very much. As we are departing today, let us carry forward the knowledge and relationship we have built here. And let us be inspired by the important work we do, work that safeguards justice, the rule of law for our people. Remember, the pursuit of the prosecutorial excellence, interagency cooperation, and global alliances is what must burn in our hearts. Every time you step into your calling, being a prosecutor, you should think about that. With that, I say thank you, my dear colleague and brother, and the entire management of the Zambian National Prosecuting Authority, and may all of us hand ourselves in the hands of our Creator, our God, to have mercy for us and to keep us protected every time we carry out prosecutorial functions, and to direct us that we are in a calling profession. As we return to our respective duty stations, may He keep us safe. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now call upon the learned DPP to come and call upon the person who's coming to close for us this ceremony. Learned DPP.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can hear my voice, I suppose, at the back. Please just wave your hand if you can hear my voice. I just want to be sure. Great. Thank you. What a fantastic 3 days it's been. And it's drawn to a close today, but it's been brilliant. I think that we have had such an enlightening and eye-opening and enriching experience. I can speak to that myself. But just a few parting shots. I just want to say thanks, first of all, to our chief guest. We don't want you to blush, but we hold you in very high regard. And this is why, for the first time, we decided to invite a guest outside the Republic of Zambia. And your name came up first. So whatever we give you will not signify how high we hold you in esteem. But I want you to come forward to just receive a little token from us. Advocate Olivia Emalwa. Please, a hand of applause, sir. Where's the chief administrator? It should be. Thank you so much.
Madam Chief Administrator, please come to the podium.
Of course, the other Director of Public Prosecution had to suddenly leave due to pressing business back in Malawi, but we're still able to make a presentation to him, Advocate Masauko Chamkakala. But I know the other delegate from Malawi, you are still with us. I don't know where you are. Indeed. It was great having the DPP in our presence and having you. We thank God for you. But we have Mr. Sibusiso Magagula, who's the Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions from the Kingdom of Eswatini. I want you, sir, to come and join me here and just receive as well just a small token to symbolize how grateful we are that you came out. A small token. from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much. And best regards to Advocate Nomvula, the DPP of Eswatini. We had delegates from outside the Republic of Zambia. I don't embarrass you, but you mean so much to us. So I want you to stand. You came from outside Zambia. I want you to stand. But standing is not enough. I want you to join me in front here. I want you to join us here in front. Yes, please. So we have the delegation from Tanzania. We had delegation from Namibia, Eswatini, Zimbabwe, Dr. Naidu, South Africa, Himani. So, ladies and gentlemen, Alma, Wanyama, Kenya, we're also sitting out there. Indeed. So, the people that are standing in front of you have made extra effort to come and join us here. You can see the flavor that this conference is taking. Go forward. It's becoming an international conference. So, ladies and gentlemen, just a big round of applause of appreciation. Delegates from outside Zambia. So, thank you so much. We appreciate your coming out here. And next time you have something in relations, invite us. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes. Now, the first important people speak like that. We don't want to water down anything they've said. But she's thanked the organizing committee. I think they've done a sterling job. You agree with me? And I want to call them again to the front so that you see the people that have been behind this conference in organizing it. I know so many of us have worked together. We've worked as a team. It's taken so many months to put together. But the chairpersons, the co-chairpersons for organizing the conference, Mrs. Charlie Mbawe has been the key driving force. Come to the front. Mrs. Margaret Mrs. Angelica Manza, please come to the front. I'm already in the front. Mrs. Susan Lessa, Mrs. Yvonne Banda, Mrs. Rebecca Banda, Mrs. Charity Sanga, Reverend Children, First Kasoso, Chola Mimba, Austin Fisherman, Rovis Munyeka, Stephanie Gamberi, Mr. Joe Perry, Mr. Milambo Sinyangwe, Mrs. Virginia Bata, Mr. Chitumbi Mlenda, Miss Martha Dora Luhanga, Jobs Mango, Laura, you are so new in the MP and you're already organizing things. The future is bright. Now, ladies and gentlemen, usually we do this when people are dead. I used to be a very nice person. But we want to thank this team of people who are still alive. But you see, what you've done, we really appreciate. And this is why we are parading here, so that you can be seen. But as head of this institution, just know that what you've done means a lot. And for next year's conference, I don't see any reason why we should change this team. Why we should be reinventing the wheel. we can only get better. You have to give yourself a pat, a good pat back. You've done a very, very good job. Fantastic. We know there'll be a few failures here and there, but confidently, you've pulled this off, and we really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll allow you to go and sit. And of course, in support of this team, I have two fantastic assistants, Chief State Advocate Kumbuza Mumba, the Chief Administrator Cassandra Soto. Please stand. I'll not ask you to come in front, just stand. Of course, the best assistance any DPP can ask for. They've supported this team. Thank you so much. Our chief guest has mentioned our ushers, our drivers, and everyone who's been behind. For us to mention, I just want to say thank you. Keep up this spirit. And our international speakers, I just don't know what to say to you. If we had money, you'd be going away with a lot of gifts from Zambia. But we really appreciate our sponsors. I kept seeing the names of our operating partners, and I mentioned them on the first day. I don't know how to thank you. You've overwhelmed us to an extent that we don't even need to spend them away ourselves. Yes. Thank God, because it's been in serious dire straits for the nation. You know the period that we are going through as a nation. And to have the overwhelming support from our partners, I'm lost for words. Long may this spirit continue, because it's an investment, the development of this country. It's a serious investment. We recently recruited 20 young state advocates as the National Prosecution Authority. This is their first conference. The knowledge that they've garnered is a serious investment in the future, including for the rest of the prosecutors that are gathered here today. So thank you so much. We already thanked you, and we make sure that your informers are there. Just keep it there. ZCCP, Kwato. I see you, Mr. Mtonga. AML, CFT, SK. I see you, Alma, and the team. Zanaco, big, strong, reliable. GIZ, Chandler Institute of Governance. UNFPA, our area friend. I see you, Mr. Brockman. USAID, UNICEF, UNODC, in its multifaceted form. Fantastic. WCP, GIZ. I don't know who I've left out. But you've made this possible. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. For all that has been, thanks. For all that shall be, yes. I will now call upon Deputy President of the Court of Appeal, who will do the honor to officially close what has been a fantastic conference. My Lord Justice Samuel Mchenga, State Counsel. Thank you. It's not welcome. You have a choice, but I suggest that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you look at your program, closing ceremony was scheduled to be presided over by the Deputy Chief Justice, who is now acting Chief Justice. However, because of a prior commitment, he has been unable to attend. So he asked me to come through and did not come with a prepared speech. I was comforted by the fact that I noticed that it was saying ceremony and it's also saying closing remarks, and it's remarks that I will make. So first of all, I would like to thank the financiers or sponsors of this conference. I'd also like to thank distinguished experts who made presentations at this conference. And last but not least, I recognize those who traveled from outside the country to come and participate. As an institution, I mean the judiciary, and on my own behalf, this conference was exciting to us in the sense that when we learned or had a look at the topics for consideration, we realized that out of this conference, we were going to end up with better prosecutors, in the sense that we would have prosecutors who have acquired a skill to make good prosecutorial decisions, either at trial or at the appeal stage. One issue that we rarely consider as a country is the effect of wrong decisions to prosecute in terms of taking up court space and court time. We are aware that we are thin on the ground. We don't have as many magistrates. We don't have as many courtrooms. And it delights us when you go through training, because then we are sure that the cases that will come to court are those that have been vetted by people who are very knowledgeable, and that time will be properly utilized. So it is our expectation that we will see very good performance on your part in terms of presentation of cases and presentation generally during the trial and the appeal process. I can only but marvel at the topics that were covered. During my time as DPP, we never had conferences of our own. We only found ourselves at the tail end of conferences for the Ministry of Justice. And I'm happy to see that you have time dedicated to a conference that is solely for prosecutors. I see the experts come through. We never had such interaction. With those few remarks, I'm honored to officially close this conference. And for those of you traveling, both near and far, travel safely and all the best. Looking forward to seeing you next year. Thank you.
That is it. We cannot add after State Council has spoken. So as we go, there is tea and snacks. So you may take away as you go. And safe travels. Thank you very much for coming, all of you, and God bless you.